All right, so this LG CNS IPO everyone's talking about,
Yeah.
it's gotten a lot of attention.
It's huge.
123 times oversubscribed.
Yeah. It's
On the surface, it seems like a huge success, right?
uh,
But for people who own LG stock,
right.
this might not be the win that it seems to be.
Exactly.
We're going to unpack today why this might be a reason to worry and what it could mean if you own LG.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
LG CNS is a really important company.
Okay.
They set up digital infrastructure.
Okay.
So think of like smart factories
Uh-huh.
and whole cities.
Right.
And that whole sector is doing really well.
Okay.
But the important thing here is, what does it mean for people who own LG?
Okay, so LG has spun off other companies before that have done really well, like
Yeah.
LG Chem,
Yeah.
LG Electronics.
Right.
What makes this time different?
It all comes down to what's left over in LG.
Okay.
So think of it like a basket of fruit.
Okay.
You take out all the best fruit. Eventually, you're left with just a couple of, normal ones.
Right.
In this case, LG CNS is going public.
Right.
And that leaves LG with D&O,
Uh-huh.
LG Management Development Institute,
Okay.
and LG Sports.
Those aren't exactly like the
yeah.
companies that I think of when I think.
Right. They're not going to be on the front page of the news.
Yeah. So for investors who owned LG because they wanted to kind of get in on LG CNS,
Yeah.
this is actually taking value away.
Yeah. That's the worry.
Okay.
A lot of people saw LG as a way to get into LG CNS
Okay.
without having to buy it directly.
Right.
So now with LG CNS on its own, some people might say, well,
Yeah.
the rest of LG is not as exciting.
Right.
And that could make the price of LG go down.
And that brings us to another part of this,
Yep.
which is this company, Macquarie PE.
Right.
They're a private equity firm.
Private equity.
And they've been involved in this whole thing. And I find what they've done very interesting.
It's an interesting story. So in 2020, they bought a 35% stake in LG CNS.
Okay.
And they paid about 1 trillion Korean won for that.
Okay.
Now,
That was back in 2020.
2020.
Now we're in 2025, and they've sold 13.5% of their shares
Yeah.
for 600 billion won.
It's a big return.
So they've already quadrupled their investment, basically.
More than quadrupled.
Yeah, and they still own 21.5%.
Right.
Which is now worth 4.4 trillion won.
It's a lot of money.
It's incredible. It makes you wonder if they made all this money at the expense of people who already owned LG.
That's a really important question.
Yeah.
These private equity firms,
Okay.
their whole goal is to get as much money as possible for their investors.
Okay.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
But sometimes what they do ends up taking value away from regular people who own the stock,
Right.
because those people maybe don't have access to the same information or resources.
Right. So in this case, Macquarie got a big chunk of LG CNS at a low price
Right.
and then sold some of it when it went public.
Yep.
And it seems like they might have taken value that could have gone to people who have owned LG for a long time.
That's a possibility that investors need to be aware of.
Okay.
And this whole situation really highlights how important it is to understand what it means to own stock.
Okay.
It's not just buying a ticker symbol.
Right.
It's actually becoming a part owner of the company.
Okay.
And that means you have certain rights.
Okay.
Like you get a share of the profits,
Mm-hmm.
and you get to vote on certain decisions the company makes.
So how does that apply to what's happening with LG CNS?
So with this spinoff, the ownership structure of LG is changing.
Okay.
And for everyday investors, the question is,
Yeah.
does this change reduce their influence?
Right.
Does it mean that private equity firms and big institutions now have more power than they do?
Right.
It's really important for people to pay attention
Okay.
and understand how things like spinoffs can affect their investment.
So we can't just look at the headlines. We
Right.
have to really look into these deals and understand what they actually mean for us.
Yeah.
Now, here's something that I'm struggling with.
Okay.
Why would the family that controls LG,
Mm-hmm.
who own a lot of stock themselves,
Yeah.
support something that could make the price of LG go down?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to make sense.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
And to understand it, we need to look at something interesting about South Korea,
Okay.
their inheritance tax system.
Interesting. All right, let's...
Buckle up.
Okay.
Things are going to get interesting.
Okay. So you mentioned inheritance tax.
Yeah.
How does that play into LG's strategy and maybe the price of their stock going down?
Well, so in South Korea, like a lot of countries,
Okay.
when you inherit a bunch of money or stocks, You got to pay taxes on that.
Right, inheritance tax.
Inheritance tax, yeah.
Okay.
And how much you pay depends on how much those things are worth.
Okay, so if you inherit a bunch of LG stock and the price is really high,
Exactly.
you're going to owe a lot of taxes.
That's right.
Okay.
Now, here's where it gets interesting. If LG's stock price is lower when you inherit it,
Yeah.
you're going to pay less in taxes.
Right. So
So they could be trying to keep the price down.
it's possible, yeah.
Yes.
They might be thinking about the future and when they pass on their wealth to their kids.
And so it makes more sense for them to have a lower stock price,
Yeah, in the long run.
even though it seems bad in the short term.
Exactly. Because they save a lot of money on those taxes.
But wouldn't they lose money overall if the price goes down?
Well, it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
They have to weigh the losses they might have now
Right.
against the gains they'll get later.
From taxes.
Yeah, from the lower taxes.
Okay.
And remember, they still control LG.
They're still the majority shareholders.
They're in charge,
Okay.
even if the price drops a little.
So do you have an example of how this would actually work?
Okay, so let's say one of the family members who owns a lot of LG dies,
Okay.
and their kids inherit all their stock.
Yeah.
Let's say that stock is worth $10 billion. $10 billion with a B?
With a B, that's a lot of money.
Okay,
Now, if the stock price is high, the tax rate could be like 50%.
okay.
So that means the kids would have to pay $5 billion in taxes,
Wow, that's half.
half of what they inherited.
Okay,
But if they did something like spin off LG CNS,
okay,
and that made the stock price go down,
okay,
let's say it went down to 6 billion,
okay.
then they'd only have to pay 3 billion in taxes.
They save $2 billion.
Exactly, just by having the price a little lower.
So something that looks bad on paper?
Right, like a lower stock price.
Yeah, could actually be good for them.
In the long run, yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting.
It shows how important it is to look beyond just the headlines
Okay.
and think about what's really happening
So there could be these hidden motivations behind the decisions companies make
all the time.
that we don't know about as everyday investors.
Yes, exactly.
This whole thing makes me rethink what I thought I knew about how companies make decisions.
Yeah, it's not always about making as much money as possible right now.
Right.
Sometimes it's about setting yourself up for the future.
And the people in charge might benefit in ways that we don't see.
It's about thinking long term.
Okay, so then what does this strategy tell us about what the family that controls LG wants for the company in the future?
That's a great question.
Are they just trying to save money on taxes?
Maybe.
Or is there a bigger plan here?
It's possible they're streamlining the company,
What do you mean?
focusing on what's really important for growth.
Like the digital infrastructure stuff with LG CNS.
Exactly, and getting rid of the parts that aren't as profitable.
Okay, so maybe instead of seeing this as a bad thing,
Yeah.
it's actually a way for them to make LG stronger.
Right, it's like shedding some extra weight.
Okay.
And they can be more flexible and move faster.
To keep up with all the changes that are happening in the world.
Exactly, the world is changing fast.
Yeah.
And maybe this is how LG is adapting.
So instead of this being them taking value away, this could be them trying to make sure LG is successful.
It's a different way of looking at it
Yeah.
for years to come.
Long-term thinking.
This is so fascinating.
It is.
It's like we're peeling back the layers of an onion
Yeah, there's always more to the story.
and finding out all these things that are happening behind the scenes.
The motivations, the
Yeah.
strategies. But at the end of the day, what does it all mean for people like us?
That's the big question.
Who are just trying to invest our money and make good decisions.
Yeah. How do we make sense of all this?
How should we be thinking about this LG situation?
Right. What can we learn from it?
So we've been talking about this LG CNS spinoff, and there's clearly more to it than meets the eye.
Yeah, it's complicated.
What's the bottom line for everyday investors?
Well, I think the big takeaway here is you've got to be informed. Got to be involved.
Okay.
This whole LG thing shows how what companies do can really affect people who own their stock.
Yeah.
It's a wake-up call.
Okay.
We can't just sit back and watch the market. We got to understand what's going on and make smart choices.
So you're saying we can't just check our account balance every once in a while?
Exactly.
We got to really dig into the companies we're invested
We
in.
got it.
Do your research?
Yeah, don't just read the headlines.
Okay.
Take the time to read company reports.
Uh-huh.
Follow the news.
Okay.
Understand the risks and the potential rewards.
It sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, it can
I'm
get.
not a financial expert.
Well, that's okay. There's a lot of help out there.
Okay.
You can start with some good financial websites.
Okay.
There are investor forums.
Yeah,
Even your brokerage firm probably has some educational stuff.
that's true.
And don't be afraid to talk to a financial advisor.
Okay.
They can give you some really good advice and help you figure out this whole market thing.
So it's about being proactive.
Yep.
educating yourself
Exactly.
and getting help when you need it.
Right. It's like being a detective.
Yeah.
You got to find the clues
Yeah.
and figure out why companies are doing what they're doing.
It's like a puzzle.
Exactly. And don't forget about diversification.
What do you mean?
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
Spread your investments around
Sure.
different companies, different industries, even different types of investment.
So if one thing goes bad...
Right. You're not wiped out.
Okay, that makes sense.
It helps you manage risk and protect yourself from the ups and downs of the market.
So as we wrap up our look at this LG CNS listing,
Yeah.
it's obvious that there's always more going on than we see at first glance.
There's always another layer.
The move might look like a good deal for some,
Right?
could actually have hidden consequences for others.
Especially everyday investors.
Yeah.
Yeah, the LG case is a good reminder that companies don't always do what's best for everyone,
Yeah.
especially in the short term.
Right.
They might have a long-term plan.
Even if it doesn't make sense to us.
Exactly. And even if it hurts some people along the way.
So we have to stay informed,
Absolutely.
stay involved,
Yep.
and ask questions.
The right questions.
We've covered a lot today.
We have.
Spinoffs, private equity, even inheritance tax in South Korea.
It's been a journey.
It really shows how complicated this whole world of corporate finance is.
Yeah. It's not simple.
And it reminds us that we got to be careful with our money.
We've got to protect ourselves.
Well said.
Knowledge is power.
Yeah, especially when it comes to investing.
By staying informed and being proactive,
Yeah.
you can make good decisions.
And hopefully reach our financial goals.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the LG CNS listing.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope this analysis helps you think about your own investments in a new way.
Be smart out there.
Until next time, happy investing.